over here.
Hail Nebo, Ishtar, and Marduk. Greatest god of all!
Live on forever. There's a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods. He will tell you the interpretation.
Who is this man?
Daniel.
Daniel? Who's Daniel?
I've heard concerning you that you're able to provide interpretations. Now, if you're able to read the writing and make its interpretation known to me, then you will be clothed with purple, a gold necklace will be placed around your neck, and you will rule as the third one in the kingdom.
You may keep your gifts. Give your presents to others. However, I will read the writing to the king. This is the interpretation of the words. Meaning, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found lacking. Perez, your kingdom's been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians.
So, as you might have guessed, we're watching part 2 of the Bible drama, the Bible movie, Daniel, A Lifetime of Faith. We saw part 1 on Saturday afternoon. Now we've moved on in the story to where Daniel is an old man, and it's 539 BCE, the overthrow of Babylon by the Persians. The Persians, not the Medes, as I will come to. And I have to admit, as with the immense image depiction in part 1 and the immense tree, I really enjoyed the special effects. The Watchtower geek inside me was rejoicing to see this well-known Bible story so vividly brought to life. Do I think any of this happened? No. But it's still a very compelling story. And even to this day, you could argue, we use the phrase, the writings on the wall, meaning something bad is about to happen. And this story is where we get that phrase from. So from a cultural point of view and from a historical or biblical point of view, I enjoy seeing this scene depicted. Do I enjoy the fact that it's being depicted in a drama that's being used to coerce and manipulate Jehovah's Witnesses? No, but I can take it in isolation and enjoy it nonetheless. And interestingly, it's kind of a metaphor for me, this whole writings on the wall thing, if you think about it, for the situation the organization finds itself in now. So the Jehovah's Witness religion has reached a point where it is so abusive and so corrupt that on Saturday afternoon we had a governing body member, David Splain, effectively downplaying the concept of being a criminal, downplaying the judicial system, downplaying criminal convictions, and making excuses for paying off survivors of abuse with settlements. This is an organization that has strayed so far in a really dark and sinister direction. And I felt that in particular, the tikel part of the message, you have been weighed in the balances and found lacking. Well, that's definitely how I feel when I look at the Jehovah's Witness organization, when I look at its leadership, the governing body. They have been weighed in the balances. We can all see very clearly what's going on, what their policies are with regards to child abuse, shunning, blood transfusions. They have had opportunity after opportunity to fix things, to make things right, to do the right thing as leaders of an organization numbering into the millions of followers. They stubbornly stick to these abusive practices. And in a way, David Splain's desperate rant against apostates on Saturday afternoon was a bit like, for me at least, a writing on the wall moment. Because when they are so desperate that they need to give that kind of talk for 34 minutes, when they are so desperate that they need to downplay what it means to be a criminal, almost paving the way for their own arrest and conviction, you know this is time to get out. You know that this is an organization that has lost all credibility and deserves to lose its membership. So that was my takeaway from this scene, but I think it's also worth commenting on the historical inaccuracy of what we're watching. In part one, or during my rebuttal to part one of this drama, I drew your attention to an article by Professor Richard Carrier titled "How We Know Daniel is a Forgery." Incidentally, this article was only written as recently as May 9th, 2021, but it is a fantastically well-researched and eye-opening article explaining how we know. It's not in any doubt. It's not like this is a contested view. The consensus of Bible scholars is that the book of Daniel is a forgery. And Dr. Richard Carrier goes to the trouble of spelling out very clearly how we know this to be the case. And there's a clue that Daniel is a forgery in the scene that we've just witnessed, because we see Daniel interpret the writing on the wall in this way.
Perez, your kingdom's been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians.
Your kingdom has been divided. So the insinuation is divided in two, and given to the Medes and the Persians. Well, that's simply not what happened in 539 BCE. In 539 BCE, Babylon fell to the Persians, not the Medes and Persians, not the Medes, but to the Persians. So we might well ask, how can the book of Daniel get it wrong and talk about Medes when Medes weren't even a factor? And I thought I'd read a couple of parts of Dr. Richard Carrier's article to explain this. The actual author of Daniel was simply very ill-informed about the Babylonian and Persian eras and is struggling to make up anything he can using famous names vaguely known here and about, and also to fix failed prophecies in Jeremiah, who predicted the Medes would vanquish the Babylonians. It ended up being the Persians instead, and this can explain why Daniel has changed Darius into a Mede, which all indicates Daniel was most likely written centuries later than it purports. I will revisit that thing about Jeremiah very shortly. Later on in the article, it continues, there was never any such thing as a joint rule between Medes and Persians. Mede was a conquered province of Persia, nor any law of the Persians and Medes that governed that empire. This pairing of Medes and Persians here is a fabrication of Daniel. It is recorded nowhere else, not even in Persia's own laws, decrees, inscriptions, and declarations, nor even in Greek histories of the period. Neither Herodotus nor Xenophon mention any such thing. Isn't that interesting? We would read this story or read the Bible account of the overthrow of Babylon and hear about the Medes, and we would just take it on face value. Oh yes, it was a coalition between the Medes and the Persians. They joined forces and overthrew Babylon. But actually, when you look at history, there was no such thing as the Medes and Persians. It seems that the writer of Daniel was simply trying to cover up for the fact, or explain the fact, that the writer of Jeremiah had predicted that the Medes would overthrow Babylon, wrongly predicted that the Medes would overthrow Babylon. And this prediction can be found in Jeremiah chapter 51. So verse 11 says, polish the arrows, take up the circular shields. Jehovah has stirred up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, because he intends to bring Babylon to ruin. For this is the vengeance of Jehovah, the vengeance for his temple. And then later on in verses 28 and 29, appoint against her the nations, the kings of Media, its governors and all its deputy rulers, and all the lands they rule over, and the earth will quake and tremble, for the thoughts of Jehovah against Babylon will be carried out, to make the land of Babylon an object of horror without an inhabitant. So Jeremiah emphatically predicts that Babylon will be overthrown, not by the Babylonians, but by the Medes. And so then the writer of Daniel, because Daniel is a forgery and not actually written by Daniel, based on his insider knowledge as a senior official in the courts of Babylon, because the whole thing's a forgery and they are trying to make everything square up with what's been written elsewhere by other Bible writers, they have to introduce this concept of the Medes being somehow involved in the overthrow of Babylon, and the ruler of Babylon subsequent to this invasion being called Darius the Mede.
King Darius, this is Daniel, a Jew taken captive by the Babylonians.
Did you interpret the handwriting from the gods?
No. And not me, O king. My God, the God of Israel.
We could use a satrap who understands the captives. I confess, a satrap is not as prominent a position as Belshazzar granted you.
My lord, Daniel refused every gift and honor Belshazzar offered him.
A man without a price. We don't need you as a satrap. We need you over them. Tura, pronounce Daniel's appointment throughout the kingdom. I'll want those stealing from the treasury to know that they will now be held accountable.
Another revolt?
This is far more troubling. I just collected the land tax from an administrator.
Did he pay?
Yes, but he refuses to give us our fees.
I've had the same problem. They're calling anything more than the tax extortion.
What's changed?
Daniel.
Have you offered him anything to make him more reasonable?
He won't take a shekel of silver.
Daniel claims that what he receives is more than enough.
Don't be so naive. He's putting on a show of integrity for the king.
It won't last. Darius will tire of him soon enough.
Oh dear, so here we have Daniel's opposers, Daniel's enemies scheming against him, and this will be a recurring theme throughout this part 2 of the drama. It seems fairly obvious that these enemies of Daniel are being portrayed in such a way as to cause a connection in the minds of Jehovah's Witnesses with apostates. So this is apparently what apostates do. They scheme in the shadows. They come up with ways to undermine the authority of the governing body using underhanded means. Again, this plot line is going to play out further on, and we're going to see these opposers of Daniel, these enemies, really show their true colors and show just how evil they are. But let's talk about Darius the Mede, who we see there appointing Daniel to a position of incredible prominence within the kingdom. He is in a position where he's ruling over the satraps. He has authority over essentially what all the governors in the empire are doing. And this, again, is how we know that the book of Daniel is a forgery. Because if Daniel really had this level of prominence, really had this authority, this knowledge of how the empire worked, both the Babylonian Empire and the Persian Empire, he wouldn't be making such rookie mistakes about fundamentals of the history of that period. For example, Babylon was captured by Cyrus the Great. In fact, in this convention, they've made a big deal about the fact that the book of Isaiah supposedly predicted that Cyrus would take Babylon 200 years in advance. Please see my sushi, in which I explain how that is simply not true. But in any case, in this drama, we've heard noise made about the fact that Cyrus was the one who took Babylon. That being the case, who's this Darius guy? This Darius the Mede. We've already learned about the Medes and the fact that they had nothing to do with the fall of Babylon. So why have Darius there? If Cyrus has taken the city, why put Darius in charge? Let's hear what Richard Carrier has to say in his article. Again, how we know Daniel is a forgery. There will be a link in the description because this is wonderful information and very timely if you think about it, given that this was written or posted online as recently as May 2021. In the article, Dr. Carrier says, Daniel then invents a king who never existed, Darius the Mede. Daniel claims he took over the kingdom after Belshazzar was killed. In fact, the actual king of the Babylonians was not killed. The Persians, not the Medes, took over Nabonidus' kingdom and spared his life. The real fate of his son and sometimes regent Belshazzar is not recorded. Daniel's author was clearly quite confused by the political chronology of this period, mistaking the famous Darius the Great as the Persian king who freed the Jews, when in fact all records show, including other books of the Bible, that it was Cyrus the Great who reigned several kings previous in succession. Darius succeeded only after Cyrus's sons had their turn at the throne, first Cambyses and then Bardia. Daniel even confused who fathered whom, getting the line of succession exactly backwards. Daniel says Darius was the son of Xerxes. In fact, Xerxes the Great was the son of Darius. Darius's father was Hystaspes, probably butchering the pronunciation, a distant relative of Cyrus the Great. So I realize I may be bursting the bubble of quite a number of you watching this who may be believers in the Bible, who may believe the Bible to be the inerrant word of God. But these are all valid points, aren't they, that can't just be shrugged off. How could the writer of Daniel get it so wrong, especially if Daniel was supposedly such a senior official under both the Babylonians and Persians?